And today, we are proud to welcome the newest member of the Xbox family.
That is why we will introduce a PS4 system that is slimmer, lighter, and more energy efficient.
But what sets it apart is when you want to play away from your TV, you can remove it from the dock, get up, and go.
There's a lot of industry rumor and speculation that's going on right now about all the different hardware that Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo are working on. I personally don't like to report on rumors and speculation unless it's either really substantiated or there's just so many rumors going around that it's hard to keep track of. In this particular case, it turns out to be the latter. I want to gather it all together so that by the end of this video, we'll have a pretty solid understanding as to when we'll be seeing all of these consoles from all of these different companies. Originally, I was campaigning that the next generation of consoles were going to be coming out in 2019. Everybody likes to talk about how that's just too soon to come out with new consoles. It's not. 2019 will mark 6 years since this console generation started, unless you count the Wii U, then it's 7 years. For comparison's sake, the gap between PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2's release was 6 years, PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 3's release was also 6 years, and PlayStation 3 to PlayStation 4's release was 7 years. So it's about time. Personally, I think it's ridiculous to classify the Switch as the same console generation as the Wii U. It should be the first of the 9th generation of consoles. It plays all new games, it's replacing the Wii U. It's not exactly powerful, but neither was the Wii U. I swear this is all relevant, because Nintendo is speculated to come out with a new system this year. It's going to be an iteration of the Switch, so if the Switch isn't considered next generation hardware, then this isn't going to be either, even if it does have a 4K upscaler in the dock. Or a dock that acts as an external graphics card like we've seen with USB-C laptops. Which it won't have. It's not gonna have any of this. I don't think these 4K iterative consoles worked as well as console manufacturers intended. And for Nintendo, it'll just confuse their user base. What is this? Do I need it to play certain games? How much more expensive is it? How much better is my Mario Kart gonna look? There are new reports that seem to double down on old reports that Nintendo is going in the complete opposite direction with their next iteration. Nikkei, a Japanese business site, reported that Nintendo is letting suppliers know that they're working on a smaller, more portable Nintendo Switch with less features. Nikkei quoted, "Miniaturizing the console with portability and playing outdoors in mind, as well as cutting features to reduce the price and expand the user base." Who are they quoting here? Are they quoting Nintendo? Are they quoting themselves? Are they quoting the supplier who is then quoting Nintendo? I too can throw quotes around when I'm speaking. I think a smaller Switch with built-in Joy-Cons, maybe a more energy efficient processor with a better battery life, maybe a better screen, but if portability and a cheaper price is the primary goal here, that seems unlikely. It makes sense for them to pull a 2DS. And some people say that you can't integrate the Joy-Cons into the Switch because then you can't call it the Switch. And to that, I'll point right back at the 2DS. This console is speculated to come out as early as 2019, and I think that is a great time to do it because you might be able to get this console out before Sony and Microsoft make their next generation consoles. And if the software lineup is lackluster this year, they'll at least have new hardware to fall back on because Nintendo is the only console manufacturer that actually makes a profit on hardware sales, not just software sales. And if you're thinking about buying a Nintendo Switch anytime soon, just buy it because this thing is gonna be for a completely different demographic. It's gonna be in a different price point. Don't worry about it. They're going to be 2 different Switches selling alongside of each other. Also, I think buyer's remorse is a dumb thing to have. Maybe if something new comes out like the next week, then that might be a problem. But that's not going to happen. You're going to have months to enjoy your hardware until something new comes out, and you might not even want that thing. But Nintendo isn't the only company with new stuff in the works. Sony is reportedly taking all of their first-party developers and shifting their focus over to next-generation development. Of course, Sony is working on next-generation hardware and software, but to say that all of their first-party developers are shifting focus to PlayStation 5 development means that it's very imminent. Of course, game development takes time, but I wouldn't expect all developers to be working on PlayStation 5 stuff unless it's right around the corner. Do you remember the time right before the PS4 was announced? Ubisoft was showing off Watch Dogs footage as if it was a current gen title when it was very clearly running on next gen hardware. I get that same feeling with The Last of Us Part 2 and Death Stranding. But it's hard to tell because this console generation has had some real beautiful games lately, especially with the PS4 Pro complicating things. The first Last of Us game also came out right at the tail end of the PS3's life cycle, and they were able to port it to the PS4 just 1 year later. So that could also happen with Part 2. It worked out just fine the first time, they got to sell it to people twice. Daniel Ahmad, who has a great Twitter account, you should follow him, says that Sony has unannounced games in the works based on existing IPs. Though they may have initially been intended for PS4, Ahmad notes that there's a desire to make them cross-gen or fully next-gen. This is via VG247. Cross-gen is an interesting idea because currently the PlayStation 4 has the worst sort of implementation of backwards compatibility. If you want to play a PlayStation 3 game, you gotta have PlayStation Now. Sony recently filed a patent for backwards compatibility. It looks like whenever you insert a disc into whatever console this patent is for, the system will first check to see if it requires a legacy application, then the system will emulate whatever legacy system is required. Of course, this is just a patent, so it's not guaranteed to be implemented. But at least Sony is thinking about backwards compatibility because right now it seems like it's barely a twinkle in their eye. Also, Sony isn't going to be at E3 this year. They pulled out. Originally, I thought maybe they were just going to do their own thing like EA has done in the past, but now I think that Sony might genuinely have nothing to announce, especially if everything that they have in the pipeline is coming out for next generation hardware, and that next generation hardware is coming out in 2020. I think it's very likely that they're taking a year off to come back real strong at next year's E3. Or just trash E3 altogether. Nobody needs that shit. Just release your stuff on the internet like Nintendo does. Nobody wants to go to bullshit LA. It's been heavily speculated that Microsoft is going to be releasing 2 consoles. One, an actual super powerful home console that is more in line with what we know traditional consoles to be like, and another, cheaper, streaming-based console that is going to do all of the games processing on the cloud. At last year's E3, Phil Spencer straight up said that they're working on the next Xbox consoles, with an S. Later, Phil Spencer also said, "Our cloud engineers are building a game streaming network to unlock console quality gaming on any device." Microsoft doesn't seem to care where you play their games because they have the PC market nailed down too. It only makes sense for them to double down on a game streaming service, so a cheaper, streaming-based Xbox makes a lot of sense for a lot of people. And for Microsoft, it means more people buying monthly subscriptions, which is big money for them. And for us hardcore fans, we'll be buying the more expensive console similar to an Xbox One X. And who's to say Microsoft isn't gonna allow this game streaming service on the Xbox One X? Who's to say Phil Spencer isn't gonna walk out on stage and say, you know what? If you have an Xbox One X, you already have the next generation of Xbox console. Wouldn't that be dope as hell? Because again, Microsoft doesn't care where you play their games as long as you're playing their games.
Actually, so this is pretty crazy. After I already filmed this and while I'm editing it, Microsoft just announced a panel at GDC where they're going to be talking about a new development kit that they're releasing to put Xbox Live on as many platforms as possible, and this includes the Nintendo Switch. So not just Android, not just iOS, but the Nintendo Switch. This could potentially mean that you could play Xbox games on the Nintendo Switch via streaming. This is obviously a big deal for a lot of reasons, but it further proves that Microsoft just wants you to play their games, and that sweet subscription that they're gonna get from you, that Xbox Live subscription, that's all they care about. The next Xbox console is looking more and more like it's going to be a service, or at least it's gonna lean heavily on its service. These consoles are also rumored to come out in 2020, which would make a lot of sense. Maybe we'll get a little tease at this year's E3 because Microsoft doesn't seem to be as tight-lipped about their plans as other console manufacturers are. I originally thought that this year seemed like a solid year for some new consoles. I guess what led me to that conclusion was that there's really not much going on.
Where are all the new games? These iterative consoles didn't work out the way that they wanted, especially the PS4 Pro, so it's time for something new. Maybe you have the Xbox One X and the PS4 Pro to blame for this delay. This also means that 2019 might just be a lackluster year for gaming, especially if Microsoft and Sony are holding their big IPs for next generation releases. Don't forget that Microsoft bought 7 game studios in 2018, and you bet your ass they're all working on something. And then there's Nintendo, doing their own thing and crushing it. Despite what investors say, lousy investors. They have record sales numbers, and investors are still not happy. Goes to show you, you can have a lot of money and not know dick. So what do you guys think about the next generation of hardware? Is this too soon? Is this just what you wanted? Do you want a refresh? And what do you think about getting an iteration of the Nintendo Switch? You know what? You're probably watching this channel and you're probably not somebody who needs one. You're probably just gonna be just fine with the Switch that you have. But anyway, leave it in the comments below, add me on Twitter and all this other social media garbage. What do you think is gonna happen with these next generation systems, and when do you think they're gonna come out? Anyway, hey, we got new videos and live streams all the time. We got live streams here on YouTube and over on twitch.tv/WulffDen. And if you support us here on YouTube, clicking that join button, get that little icon next to your name in the comments, or you support us on twitch.tv/WulffDen. You can use Twitch Prime. It's free if you have Amazon Prime. Helps us out. Link either of those accounts to your Discord account. Join our supporter-only Discord where you get videos like this early. You get to play games with us. You get a private supporter chat. All of those links are in the description below. You could also help support us by purchasing some WulffDen apparel, which we still have. What other YouTuber do you know sells their own flannel? But of course, the most important thing that you can do to help us out is just subscribe. That way you get notified every time we get new videos. Click that bell and share this video with a friend who is interested in purchasing a console maybe sometime soon, maybe wants to know what's happening in the future. Thank you guys very much. You have yourself a very good week.